Welcome to The Curated Craftsman, a podcast where we'll learn about the hands, head, and heart behind creative entrepreneurs just like you. Kate Cook is the artistic drive behind Asphalt Canvas Custom Art and your host for this conversation about art, business, and belief.
Hey y'all, today we are getting to know the hands, head, and heart behind Anna Rose Bain, an award-winning fine artist and oil painter based in Colorado. Known for her breathtaking figurative works, luminous portraiture, and plein air studies, Anna often depicts people in peaceful settings or places that evoke happiness. She especially loves painting women and children, seeking to convey all of her subjects with honesty and sensitivity. Her work has been recognized internationally with features in Fine Art Connoisseur and American Art Collector. A signature member of the Oil Painters of America, she is exhibited in some of the most esteemed galleries and competitions in the country. Beyond painting, Anna is a dedicated mother, wife, and educator. She's an advocate for fine art, using light, color, and movement to celebrate the human experience. We are here with an artist that I have admired for quite some time, and I'm excited to get to know her better. Her name is Anna Rose. Do you want to do a kind of an over introduction with what you make and who you make it for?
Sure. I do representational oil painting, representational in the sense that I make things look like things as opposed to abstract painting. I do a lot of portraits, figurative paintings, which involve anything that has a person in it, landscapes, florals, still lives, and I've come to be known more recently for paintings of my kids especially. So I tend to incorporate my home life, my family life, and just the things that are meaningful to me day to day into my work. And so a lot of the things that are just part of my everyday end up in my paintings. And a lot of the time I'll take it to a little bit more of a whimsical and imagination-filled sort of realm where my kids are reading to a mythical creature or doing something where there's animals in there as well. And so I love to play with that aspect but really it's anything that catches my eye, anything that I find beautiful and worthy of putting in a painting.
When I was pregnant, I almost bought a print of one of your little girls sitting in front of the lion.
Oh,
I
yeah.
love that painting. It has such a deep meaning to me. And in fact, right before I jumped on this conversation with you, I was showing my husband Morgan your Instagram page. And you described your work perfectly because he said, I love the realistic quality, but with like the more fantasy, like painterly aspects in the background.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
love that.
And that painting, especially the one you mentioned, it's called "A Child Will Lead Them." I actually had a friend who works with counseling and therapy, and she hangs it in her office. And people comment on it all the time because they're like, "I want to be that child, like with this big lion, protecting me." And yeah,
Yeah.
there's I love it when I can incorporate symbolism in my work like that. But
Yes.
as you were saying, some of those painterly aspects come in as well. And so
Mhm.
I was very classically trained. When I first started out, my work was really, really tight, meaning I tried to make everything as realistic as I possibly could. And I wanted it to look exactly like a photograph. And I still get that comment a lot where people will say, your work looks like a photo. And I know they mean it as a compliment, but I'm always like, well, I would hope it looks a little better than a photo. That's usually my goal, is to enhance it to a point where it's even better than the real thing.
Wow.
And that's kind of what I'm looking for, is capturing the soul and essence of what I'm painting, hopefully
Cool.
bringing an extra element or layer of meaning and symbolism and beauty to it. So
That's
that's always
wonderful.
my goal.
Well, I can see that in your works like so much. I saw on your website that you went to the Florence Art Academy. Is that like in Italy, Florence?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool. Can you talk a little bit about that and if it was intertwined with any sort of college experience?
Yeah, so I have my art degree from Hillsdale College, which is in Michigan, and it's a liberal arts college. So it pretty much covers everything, but you can
Mhm.
get an art degree from there. And so their program is actually very classical.
Okay.
And it was my professor at Hillsdale who encouraged me to do a summer abroad program in Florence. And he said, "Hey, try these ateliers that are here in Florence. And if you can get just this immersive, full-on experience where you're just surrounded by art 24/7, it's going to be life-changing." And it really was. So I wasn't there for very long. It was only a month, and it was in July, so it was sweltering hot, and there were tourists everywhere.
That's so true. That's so
But I
true.
would spend my mornings, 3 hours every day, going to the Florence Academy, painting the figure. And I had never painted a figure from life before because where I went to college, it was very conservative, and
Same.
we had student models, and they were always wearing bathing suits or
Yes. Yes.
something. It was also my first time working under North Light, which is a very traditional kind of lighting. It's the most consistent lighting you can get. We had a skylight lighting the model from up above. And so the light didn't really change. And so that was a new experience for me as well. And then in the afternoons, I would just walk everywhere in Florence and go to the museums, go to the gardens, paint, sketch. I got myself into a lot of trouble.
And did you go with other classmates or was this just the solo?
No, I was all alone, and I was 21 years old and totally
Wow.
clueless about the world. And all I wanted to do was just immerse myself in art. So
Mm,
I had a lot of life experiences there as well. I can't even tell you how much it impacted just the way that I was able to see after
mm.
coming back and being immersed in that culture for a whole month where art is so valued. And
It
it's
is.
just like you walk past a statue or a fountain or a mosaic, every single where you go, like there's no block in Florence that doesn't have art on it.
Mm. Yes, that is so true. I could attest that for most of Italy as well, I think, because I also did a study abroad program in Italy. We only spent a short time in Florence, but we spent time in smaller towns, and even there, the art is
Mhm.
valued at a high regard. I remember like sitting, like in front of a restaurant, and when we were tasked to fill up a sketchbook, we did a lot of plein air stuff with watercolor and ink.
Great.
It was a blast. I had a very equal, like high up there experience, is what you were saying. But yeah, I just remember them like actually offering us like money to like paint out in front of the restaurant. And there was a point where we got enough money to buy lunch one day because every people just started
Oh,
watching us because it was like 6 or 7 kids like out there painting. So of course it's going to attract some attention. But
yeah.
yeah, it was just very different the way art was part of a lifestyle. Like it was very normal
It's
to them.
valued more. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's almost like they
definitely.
treated you like a street musician where you
Yes. Yeah,
put out your
exactly.
guitar case and have them throw the change in.
Yeah, seriously. And hey, we'll take whatever we can get back then. Probably now
Yeah,
too,
for
but
sure. For sure. I know I ran out of money when I was in Florence.
yes, it's easy to do. As far as your timeline, how long have you been doing this full time?
It's been about 18 years
Oh
that I've
my
been painting full
gosh.
time. So
Wow.
when I graduated college, that
Yes.
was 2007.
Okay.
And I did take on a job working for a photographer shortly after that.
Okay.
I was waiting for my husband or my then fiance to finish school. So I had about a
Okay.
year before starting to paint full time. But as soon as he got a job out of college and we got married, I was just up and doing it. And
Wow.
he was like, "Don't worry about getting another job, just paint." And so we had moved to Texas right after we got married. I set up a little French easel in this giant space that we had, and it was totally empty, but I was like, I'm just gonna paint. And I put myself out there. I was doing art festivals. I was
Mm.
doing listings on Craigslist, which was kind of, new at the time. And it was like whatever I could do to get my name out there.
Looking for an affordable way to get your creative business in front of the right audience? Well, after your feedback, I'm excited to announce the Curated Craftsman podcast is now offering the Maker's Mention episode sponsorship. For a one-time contribution of $20, your creative business will be featured in a podcast episode, permanently listed in our show notes and blog, and ultimately introduced to an audience that values craftsmanship, whether they're fellow makers, potential clients, or people who appreciate the artistry behind what you create. This is an easy, budget-friendly way to gain visibility and support the podcast all at the same time. But act fast because there are a limited number of sponsorship opportunities available per season. Visit the link in our show notes and easily claim your Maker's Mention today and put what you make in front of an engaged, like-minded community.
I was visiting galleries, stopping in and talking to the gallery owners. I found community there. I found a group that did life portraits. And so I started showing up every week. And the guy that ran it was kind of like, who is this chick? Like, what is she, because I just kept showing up. And
Yeah.
and eventually he trusted me enough to help lead some of these workshops. And so I taught one of my very first workshops at his
Wow.
studio there. So it was just a whole lot of like building momentum and just working, putting in the work.
Wow, there's so much to unpack there. I always like to ask creators, creative entrepreneurs especially, about their significant other, and it sounds like he was incredibly supportive of you. That's
Yeah, I
wonderful.
would say that's one of the things that's kept us together for so long.
Really?
We are very,
Wow.
very different people. He graduated with a degree in chemical engineering, and he's in sales, and he works for this company that makes automation equipment. And so we are polar opposites in the way that we think, but we always like to say, hey, we're both problem solvers. It's just that I'm, well, he's like, you create your own problems, Anna, and then you have to solve them.
I totally understand. I can resonate.
Whereas he gets presented with problems that are like more practical and
Yeah, well, I would say that he might have the easier job because there's one answer. See, when you're an artist, there's like a million answers to the
it's
same
so
problem.
true. It's so
Yes.
true. Yes, I'm creating the problem, but I'm also creating the solution and creating something that
Yes.
is entirely original. So
Mm. Gosh, that is so deep. I didn't expect that. And then also, it surprised me to hear you say, so you started out with workshops pretty early on in your career, teaching workshops.
yeah, I was in
That's
my early
wonderful.
20s. I want to say my first workshop, I was either 24 or 25.
Wow.
It was through that group that I was meeting with every week, where we'd
Yes.
just hire a model and paint their portrait. And
Okay.
eventually, some of the other people that showed up to this group were like, "Hey, do you teach?" And I was like, "No, no, no. I still have so much to learn." And
Yeah.
but I was encouraged to try it, and I fell in love with it. And I learned so much more about painting and about how to articulate
Mm.
my thought process through
Mhm.
that experience. And I'm so, so grateful that I was pushed in that direction because it just opened up a whole other side of what I was capable of. And just brain function and just being
Yes.
able to, like I said, articulate my thoughts. That's a really big one because a lot of artists struggle to even be able to talk while they're painting. Like they just can't do it.
Yes.
And I got so good at being able to express everything I was thinking while I was
Mhm.
working that students would just sit there and be like, oh, that's why she did that. Or that's, that brush stroke, she put that there for that reason, because I'm actually telling them exactly
Mhm.
why.
Yes.
So, yeah, a great learning opportunity for me. And so I would say I got more out of it than my students did.
Oh, well, if they were sitting next to you, they'd probably say something different. I say this a lot, but I had my little brother used to be a huge musician, and when he was first learning how to play guitar, like in high school, his guitar teacher said something that has always stuck with me whenever I talk about my work or talk to other artists about speaking about theirs, because you're right, there is a lot of creative people, artists especially, that just are so timid and don't have any assurance or confidence when it comes to
Mhm.
talking about why they made the work, which there's no wrong answer. It's your answer. And
Yeah.
so there should be no timidity around that. But what he said was, I'm going to teach you how to play guitar, but I want to make sure that you're talking to me the entire time while you're learning how to play these chords, because eventually we're going to add
Ooh.
lyrics to this song, and you're going to have to figure out how to do both at the same time, sing and play.
That's
So
a good teacher. I grew
yes.
up playing piano. I played since I was 8, and I did not
Oh,
have a teacher that encouraged me to sing while I played, so I cannot sing and play at the same time.
really? Oh, I've always
So,
wondered that. Wow, that's interesting.
yeah, yeah, he
So
had a good teacher. That's great.
yeah, that's amazing. Well, I can definitely attest also to what you were saying about how teaching makes you a better artist overall, because
Mhm.
I would imagine like breaking your process down. You have a bunch of like YouTube tutorials that are free, but
Yeah,
then you also have paid courses that you can take to learn how to
yes.
paint certain paintings
Yeah.
and things like that.
Workshops pay, but not great. So for me, it's more about sharing what I've learned from all these other different sources throughout the course of my life
Yes.
and passing on that knowledge because it's not something to be hoarded or kept to yourself. If
Mm-hmm.
we really want art to continue to be valued, especially in the day and age of AI, we have to keep sharing that. And we
Mm-hmm.
have to keep spreading the value of art and why it's so important and why it's so good for us and why creating is so good for us.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a huge piece of it. But yeah, I would say it also gave me a lot of opportunities to just meet people because you
Mm-hmm.
can spend hours and hours in your studio just working away and go a little bit crazy, spending all that time by yourself.
Yes.
Teaching is such a great opportunity to get to know other artists, to figure out what other problems they might be having in their art,
Yeah.
um, and to learn like what everybody else is going through, what they're working on. You might find that you're really inspired by something that a student is doing and the
Mm,
ideas that they have. So I go into it and I'm always excited about what I'm going to learn from them, and also hoping that they can come away from my workshop with something that's going to help them along the way as well.
for
So it's
sure.
really a win-win situation for everybody.
Yeah, you've had some really cool workshop opportunities like abroad. Can you talk a little bit about those opportunities and how they came to
Yeah.
be?
Well, I've only done one international workshop so far.
Okay.
It was pretty hard to top.
I
I
can't
got to teach
imagine.
in South Africa in 2023 with an organization that's fairly new. It's called Workshops in SA, so Workshops in South Africa.
Okay.
And in South Africa, there's a lot, it's a huge country, right? And there's a lot of interest in art, but not
Really?
too many teachers there. And so this artist who started the organization was just starving for other artists and to learn from other people. And so she was like, well, I can lead tours. I can bring someone here and they can bring students and then I can learn from them too. And so put all that together and you've got this amazing experience where she's really, really good at getting artists to go on, go on safari and get these wonderful experiences. And she organizes it really well, but then getting that art in there as well and the
Yeah.
education and the inspiration and just being in a wonderful place to do it. It was all it was such a good experience.
Wow.
Um,
Wow. And
yeah,
did she connect with you on Instagram or how did that
she
come to
did. She
fruition?
found me over Instagram and it was during
Awesome.
COVID. And so she was sitting there in South Africa. Everybody was quarantined and she was just building her business and just being patient with it and
Wow.
lining up different artists and working out her business plan and all of that during COVID. And so I didn't do the workshop until 3 years later,
Wow.
but
Wow.
it was amazing. Yeah.
Oh, I just loved I'm on your newsletter and I just loved seeing all the pictures. I was definitely living vicariously through all the photos and things that you were sending out from that trip. That's a good segue too to talk about how, you paint a lot from life, which I think you can tell in your work. It's very fluid and there's a lot of movement, and I think that comes from painting from life. And in South Africa, I would assume you guys painted a lot of plein air, like being outside and
Mhm.
painting what you saw. Is that right? Did
Yeah, we
Yeah.
did. My favorite experience from that was we went to several different game preserves, and that's where we would stay. And this one was called Garden Route Game
Okay.
Reserve. And you go out on this patio where we would have breakfast or dinner every day and look out, and there's just elephants walking by.
Oh my God.
And
That is cool.
And so we got there and it was almost sunset, and I grabbed my painting stuff, rushed out to this patio, set it up really, really fast. All the other students were like, we're tired. We've been in the car for 5 hours. We just want to sip on some wine. South African wine is really good. And just veg, but they all kind of pulled their chairs up around me and watched while I painted. And I got to paint these elephants kind of crossing the ridge in the background with these trees and the mountains behind them. It was so much fun. And I don't remember how much time I spent on it because the light
Yeah.
changed very fast, but
Amazing.
you could definitely tell that it was a painted memory, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I totally get that. Because then when you look back on it, it's weird, even in sketchbooks and stuff, when you look at your old work, you can, at least for me, you can like remember the smells, you can remember
Yes, you remember
every little
everything.
detail. It's so
The
weird.
bug that landed on you.
Yes, yes. That's why like when I see old ladies, like old lady and old men artists, you think like, wow, what like an amazing memory they must have. Like my grandma used to do crossword puzzles all the time to keep her mind smart, but like we get to paint and that's gonna be
Yeah.
like memories. I'm excited for that. I think that's so
Everything
cool.
else is gonna go, but I'll remember
Yeah.
surrounding every painting I did.
For real, for real. And so, okay, so when the light changes, then how do you take that work back to your studio and try and finish it from a photo, or do you do it from memory? How do you go
Sometimes,
about
yeah,
that?
or sometimes I just leave it as a sketch because
Oh, really
it's
cool.
almost more pure in that form. It's
Mm,
like this is what I got in 45 minutes or an hour and a half, and
yeah.
that's the memory. And if I try to change it too much based on photos that I took or even based on memory, it's going to change the feeling and the dynamic of the painting.
Hmm.
But then there are other times when I'm like, I really wish I'd been able to develop this a little bit further. And so I'll take photos, hopefully with either my DSLR or my cell phone. I prefer the digital camera because cell phones these days they claim they're really good, but they oversaturate and over contrast every image. And
Yes.
so, actually, if I can take pictures with both cameras, then I can bring them both back and be like, okay, how much closer to my actual memory of this is, this camera versus this camera. So I
Yes.
can kind of compare. In a perfect world, I'd have all of that.
Yes.
And then other
Um,
times you might bring it back and do a larger, entirely different painting based on the
yes.
study that you did on location. I just finished a portrait recently that I did from a study that was a demo for a workshop last year.
Oh,
And I
wow.
decided, okay, I had photos of her, I have the study, so I have color notes in the study. And I was like, I want to just take this further. So I ended up putting a different background behind her, changing up her wardrobe and
Wow.
kind of changing the whole thing. But it was a really fun opportunity to take something and make it more. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. And I was just thinking, you said you started off your style being like very definitive and like fine line.
Mhm.
How do you think, or what influenced your style to become more, for lack of better words, painterly?
A great question. I'm so excited to answer that.
Oh, good.
Two artists influenced me hugely,
Okay.
early 20s. And one of them was when I was 18 years old, a freshman at Hillsdale College. My professor took several of us art majors on a field trip to Youngstown, Ohio for the retrospective show of Richard Schmid. And Richard
Okay.
Schmid he's written what I like to call the Bible of oil painting. It's called Alla Prima, Everything I Know About Painting. Amazing, amazing book. And he
Okay.
writes it in this very conversational, relatable style that's so much fun to read, but it is just full of everything you could possibly need to know about oil painting. And so I got to see this show and see his paintings in person. And he gave a talk and a slideshow lecture, and just hearing him talk about everything that he'd painted over the years and just his passion for it, I
Yeah.
was like, wow, this is what I want to do with the rest of my life. And I
Wow.
had never seen anybody paint so freely. Um, if you look at his paintings, he creates these vignettes with just a few brush strokes, and boom, that's the background. And then he'll put the subject in over the top of that. And it's not haphazard, it's all incredibly intentional. He knows exactly where he's going. He was actually a master chess player, so you can kind of see
Oh,
that in the way that he lays out a painting.
yeah.
And so that was one huge influence, just getting to see his work. And then later on, years later, I got to actually paint with him one time,
Oh my
which was so
gosh.
incredible. I had taken a workshop with his wife, Nancy, who is also an amazing, amazing painter. And she's still alive. She's still painting, doing beautiful work. And she
Wow.
invited me to come out and paint with them. So that was huge. And so the other big influence was John Singer Sargent, and he was a early 20th century great American painter. And so if you go to the Met or the MFA in Boston, you will see his portrait paintings. His most famous one is probably Madame X, um,
Okay.
debatably. He's got several.
Okay.
Any Sargent painting you just walk up to, and I remember my professor looking at one at the museum in Ohio and just going, Sargent was a god. And it's of a woman standing in a black dress, and she's got this spaghetti straps. And in the original painting, one of her straps was actually fallen down off her shoulder, and it was
Yes.
considered very scandalous. So he had to repaint the strap back up.
Oh my gosh. Okay, that is stunning. Wow.
It is amazing, amazing painting. Yeah.
Yes, I can like your ballerina paintings definitely emulate this. That is so
Oh, well,
pretty.
thank you.
You're
Yeah, every time
welcome.
I see a Sargent painting, I'm so extremely humbled. But what's
Wow.
interesting is I tried to do a copy of a Sargent painting when I was in college, and I had no idea how to do it. It was such a disaster. Like I totally bombed it. And from then on, I was like, I want to learn how to paint like that
Yeah,
because it's a very, very different approach to painting from
really.
start to finish versus what I was learning in a very traditional classical setting. In classical painting, you start with really, really thin layers. You start with your darkest dark and you work up to your lightest light. And you do
Yes.
that kind of progressively. With alla prima painting, or what Richard Schmid does, and what John Singer Sargent implemented in much of his painting, it's called direct painting, where you're working wet into wet and you're not allowing the layers to dry.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
you're just working with wet paint and you're trying to get it right. Every single brush stroke in the right place, the right size, the right shape, the right color, the
Mhm.
right value, everything, the right
Wow.
edge.
Wow.
So it's much harder to do. And I, being a glutton for punishment, was like, that's what I want to learn how to do.
Wow. And I can see that in your like little 20-minute videos, it's all wet on wet.
Yes.
That's
Yes,
amazing.
it is.
Wow, that totally informs my like view of your work. That's so true because if you like people that don't know how oil paint works, like if you continually keep at it, although it never dries, it just becomes so muddy. Like it just gets so gross and the
Yeah.
colors kind of all blend together. And so
Yeah.
I could see
And
where
it
it's
does
like,
dry eventually. In fact,
yeah,
here in Colorado, it dries, it gets tacky overnight.
yeah. Oh, really?
Depends on where you are. If you have a lot of humidity, it won't dry as fast. But
Yes.
so it does have a timeline, it
Yes.
does have its limitations, but that's one of the things I love the most about it is being able to push the paint around and get
Yes.
it where I want it to go without worrying about it drying right away. But
Yes.
you're right, the very first oil painting I ever did as a student in college was I was just telling somebody this story. We did a still life and it took us all semester to do the still life. And so I had like a kettle and I had an apple and I had this piece of bread and the bread was so moldy by the end of the time, like by the time I was done with that painting.
Yeah.
Um, and then we were painting it from natural light, and using, I think, east window light or something. By the end of the semester, I had finished my painting and I was really proud of it, but it looks like it was painted on the grayest, most gloomy day because my colors were so muddy.
Yes, yes. I have paintings
And
like
I
that from
just
college.
didn't know how to keep them really vibrant. So that was
Yeah.
definitely part of the journey was learning how to manipulate paint in a way that you have total control over it.
That's
And
so
that
true because it
takes
can
many,
so
many years.
easily be controlling of you. I've like I totally understand. Like when I first started the medium I use now is enamels, and when I first started that, it was
Mm,
so challenging for me to learn a new type of like viscosity of paint and how quickly it dries and move. It was totally like moving me, and I was not figuring it out. And it just takes so much time to like kind of get your groove and know your.
enamels, those get tacky really fast, don't
Oh,
they?
yeah, super fast drying. It's very
Wow,
different than oil. But
that
it's
would drive me crazy.
yes, at first it did, but now it's like, oh, this is wonderful because I build up so many layers and it's good. It works for my style now. And now I look back on my old oil paintings and I can see little areas where I'm like, wow, I was trying to break out of like that and do what I'm doing now, but I didn't know how. And so this
That's
medium,
so cool.
yeah, it's
That's what it
special.
takes. And
Yeah.
they say that's why it's so good to try different mediums so
Hmm.
you can realize your potential as an artist,
That's so true.
essentially. Figure out how this matches your style or your personality, because we all have different personalities. And I talk about that a lot when I teach,
Yeah.
because I'll see students who are real stingy with their paint usage. They're just so
Yes.
afraid of using a lot of paint. And then others, they are covered in paint from head to toe.
Yes. Yes. Oh man, that's so true. That is so true. As a creative entrepreneur, have you ever wished you had an assistant to handle your social media and email marketing so that you could just focus on your craft? We know that writing captions and long form content of any kind takes so much time, but it's absolutely necessary to promote and market ourselves. Even worse, what we write doesn't always clearly communicate the story behind our creative work to potential buyers. That's where Art Helper AI comes in. It saves me hours by crafting clear, authentic content that speaks to my audience and ensures I'm consistently posting. This tool helps me sell my art, promote my podcast, and stay true to my brand voice, giving me more time at the easel where it matters most. With Art Helper AI, you can generate social media posts, emails, and blog content in minutes, create stunning in-room mock-ups and product descriptions effortlessly, get museum-quality titles and pricing recommendations, all in your voice, optimized for SEO. And my favorite part, unlike ChatGPT, Art Helper AI guarantees no AI training on your uploaded images with their art protection guarantee, keeping your artwork safe and secure. The key is to use this tool with integrity. The better the input, the better the output. You write your content to the best of your ability and then allow Art Helper AI to polish it for maximum impact. You can try Art Helper AI absolutely free right now and see how it can transform your creative business. If you love it, you can choose a subscription plan and unlock even more time-saving tools. Visit my affiliate link in the show notes to create your very own studio assistant, one that doesn't ask for the day off, but instead gives you that valuable time back at the workbench. I love asking. The whole reason I started this is because I think everybody's idea of craftsmanship is different. And so I would love to get your take on what you think defines good craftsmanship.
Ooh, I love that question. I think it takes a love and a respect for the materials.
Mm.
That's a big one. It took me many years to discover what I liked to work with, what I preferred as far as my canvas, my brushes, the paint brands I use,
Mm.
um, and the texture that I like to work with. So not just jumping in and using what's available. I mean, sometimes you have to. If you're
Yes,
on a budget, you make it work. But just really, really, really getting to know those materials and using them to match your personality, your style, and your goal for the work. Yeah, I think really good craftsmanship is full of love for the materials and then also pure intention. It's nothing about it is accidental. There
Mm.
is, from start to finish, you have a plan.
Wow, I love that. That's a kind of a man, you don't really hear that very much in the art world because everyone's like happy accident, but I think of like happy accidents or serendipity but like I paint very planned out. Everything I paint is very planned out. So I really resonate with that mindset and that thought like there's a plan for every brush mark and I have the sketch drawn
Yeah.
and I love
And
that.
I totally
Intentional.
agree that there can be happy accidents.
Oh yeah.
I love Bob Ross, who doesn't?
Yeah,
But at
seriously.
the same time, you can't do a whole painting just that way. Like
No.
you have to have a plan. And Bob Ross certainly did. Every time he
Yes.
set up to do his little PBS thing, it was like he knew exactly what he was going to paint. And
100%.
so if you have a brush stroke or a mark that ends up looking differently than you intended and you love it, that's a happy accident. I think
Yeah.
that's great. And I have plenty of those. But it's also a lot of just being open. Yeah, it's a combination of being open to what's possible while having a roadmap and following that roadmap.
Yes, it's kind of like a metaphor for life. That's crazy.
I'm always comparing. Yes.
So when you decided that you were going to do this and transition this into an actual job, like a career, were there any mindset issues that you had or any like struggles that you can remember like overcoming that were prominent?
Yeah, big ones. One of them was I just wasn't that good.
Mm, wow.
Coming out of college, I was a
Mm,
big fish in a small pond at Hillsdale College. There were only six art majors that graduated the year I graduated. And
okay.
I was the one winning all the awards. I had a solo show at Hillsdale. I was the only student ever to do that. And they had I don't know, 250 years or something. They've been around a long time. And so I came out of college kind of with this big, like, oh, I'm pretty good attitude. And then as soon as I got into the real world, I was like, oh, wait, never mind.
Yes.
I've got a
Yes.
lot to learn. So I had a major lesson in humility,
Wow.
just getting out and trying to find work. So that was one. A big one was just getting my name out there. So like I said, I was building my brand, trying to find networking anywhere I could. My husband actually helps me build a website, which was great. But a lot of it was just, I was in my early 20s and I was lacking in self-confidence. And that was
Mm.
probably the biggest one. So I would whine to my husband all the time, like, oh, I'm just not doing very well and I'm not making money at this or whatever. And he was always so great about cheering me up and just being like, as encouraging as one can be when you've got a spouse who isn't confident in themselves.
Mm.
And that's a hard thing to put on your spouse, you know. I wish that I'd had more confidence back then, but it does come with experience and just perseverance. And to give my younger self some credit, I never quit.
Yeah,
I just kept going.
that makes a
And
huge difference.
yeah, even though I was a whiny baby, I just kept going.
The business that we're making is emotionally driven to some extent. Like when it's not like we're just creating like pencils or staplers or something. It's like we're creating this emotional thing. And so I think it's easy for, especially women, let's be real, to get really tied up emotionally in the work, especially
Yeah.
if it's not resonating with somebody. And so to separate those two, I mean, for me, it's like a weekly struggle. I have to constantly remind myself, like, do not get tied up. Like business cannot be emotional. It is just cut
Mhm.
and dry. This is how it is, and it's hard. It's a really hard balance. And
That's really hard. I agree. That's a good
yeah,
point you're making because you have this emotional connection and attachment to your work. You know, you
yes,
wouldn't be doing it if you didn't.
exactly.
And and so there's that piece of it. And there's also the fact that it is a very vulnerable thing to put yourself out there and your work and to market yourself. You know, being a one-woman show here, that's no easy job.
Yeah.
But I learned pretty early on that if I tried to cater to what I thought people wanted, it wasn't going to do well.
Yep.
And so I
Wow.
had to just focus on what I wanted to paint. And whether people liked it or not shouldn't matter while you're in the process of creating.
Yeah.
When the work is done, then you can go on to market it and try to find a collector for it. But when you're creating, it is you and your work and nobody else. And so that was a hard lesson that I had to learn kind of early
Yes.
on because, yeah, as soon as I brought anyone else into the studio, into my mind,
Hmm.
and allowed that to influence what I was making, it tarnished it.
Hmm.
You know what I
Hmm.
mean?
I totally know what you mean. But a couple months ago, I just finished a biography with Georgia O'Keeffe about Georgia O'Keeffe. And she had one of the most powerful quotes in there that has never been, I've never seen it anywhere. But she talks about, she's literally writing a letter to her friend in New York and she's discussing her work. And she's saying, like, as soon as I let the mindset of will somebody else like this into my thought process, my painting is ruined. Like it
Yep.
is almost immediately she'll make a mistake. And
Yep.
so that's so powerful. And that was like back in the 30s and 20s. So it's still the same. I think all artists are kind of wired they have a through thread. They're not wired the same, but there's definitely a little titch there. And that's why I started the podcast because all creators kind of have the same through thread in some way, shape, or form. So
Yeah,
it's
I
fun to
love
learn.
that. I love that. And I think
Yeah.
that's why galleries exist because
Mm.
artists who are truly making their art shouldn't have to do everything. It's really
Yes.
nice if somebody else can
Wow.
market your work and sell it for you. And so there's always going to be a place, I think, for galleries and for art representatives because not all
Yeah.
of us are great at selling our work or finding a collector for our work.
Yes,
So,
yes.
yeah, in some ways that keeps it pure for the artist.
Yes, I've never, I think on social media galleries get kind of a bad rap, but I did want to talk to you about gallery representation a little bit from my own, but I think that was just a beautiful sentiment towards galleries that I haven't really heard in a long time. Like
Oh,
they are definitely there to help artists, and I think we've, as a collective community, have kind of forgotten them a little bit.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, there are certainly ones that have not um, treated artists right,
Yeah.
but I've been fortunate enough to work with some galleries who are truly wonderful
Yeah.
people, wonderful business people, and they bring in the foot traffic and they know their clientele. And
Yes.
so, if you find a gallery owner who can find a home for your work,
Mm.
that's a great thing. That's a great resource. So,
Yes.
one
Yes.
of them in particular, I haven't worked with her as much recently, but she just knows her collectors so well.
Yeah.
And she'll just be like, oh, I have someone who's going to buy that. And like 9 times out of 10, they do.
Really, that is such a skill.
It really
People don't
is.
understand how challenging that is. It's
Yeah, and a lot of them have connections too, and they know the right
100%.
people. So that's really important. And then a lot of it has to do with where you are in the country. I
Mm,
sell
huge.
figures mostly to people who live either on the East Coast or the West Coast, but not so much where I live here in Denver. You're not going to
Yeah,
find as many collectors of nude paintings here in Denver because the further inland you go, the more conservative people get.
that's true. Yeah, that's so true. So when you first started your business, were you open to accepting commission only, or were you trying to promote just original artwork right off the bat?
I was doing a little bit of both. So like I
Okay.
said, my husband started my website. I would put my work on there and I would have samples of commissions that I did or samples of um, other paintings like gallery style paintings. So I
Okay.
was trying to paint everything.
Yeah.
And with the art festivals, it was I was painting what I wanted to paint, but then kind of painting what I thought people would buy. And that's how I learned that lesson, you know.
Yes.
But the commissions, yes, I would put myself out on Craigslist and be like taking commissions for portraits for whatever, you're interested
Wow.
in. And so some of the first commissions that I ended up taking were really, really challenging. And I didn't know how hard they were gonna be. So I shed a few tears over those, but they were huge learning experiences for me.
Yes.
And I just tried my best and I never had someone say, I don't want to buy this because they
Hmm.
were they were happy with it. I think I did a pretty good job early on of pricing my work appropriately, starting out and then gradually increasing my prices as I got better and as people started recognizing my work. And so that was another piece of it too, is just like you just don't know how to
No.
price your work when you first start out or any of
Yes.
that.
Do you
There
use
was
if you don't mind me asking, you don't have to get into specifics, but do you use a formula of any kind, or is it purely by size? How do you?
Yeah, I do now.
Okay.
I used to base it off of how much time I spent on the work, but
Yeah.
that didn't like translate well to collectors. They're kind of like, well, this is the same size, but it's twice as much. Why is that?
Yes. Yes.
So my galleries encouraged me to start pricing by the square inch. I
Okay.
charge a little bit more for commissions because those do require a lot more work on my end of
Hmm.
just working with the client and making sure I'm creating something that we're both happy with.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I look at commission work as more of a collaboration, whereas the studio and gallery work is something that I'm creating 100% all original, out of my own imagination or whatever it is that I'm hoping to create. Commissions are definitely more work. I even have a video on my website kind of outlining how to commission a portrait, what goes into it, why it's so expensive, and why
Hmm.
there's value there so that people really understand because you have to educate people. If they haven't done it before, commissioned a work of art, it's a whole new experience.
For my process, like I'm working with them hand in hand, like the entire way
Hmm.
through. You're like I've gone into their homes, we've done
Hmm.
colors. It's very personal process, and it is
Yeah,
so much more time than just whipping out something that you've wanted to paint for a while.
exactly.
That's awesome.
Exactly. Yeah.
Are you doing a lot of commissions and a lot of originals? Do you have is it seasonal or how does that work in your business?
It's a little bit of both. Right now, I have one commission. Last year, I had seven or eight, and it
Wow.
was overwhelming because my studio was under construction at the time. So
Yes,
I was
yes.
working out of my dining room,
Oh my
and
gosh.
the ones that I had were all very large scale commissions.
Yeah.
So I had no room.
Oh my, I
But I
cannot
got them
imagine.
done. Because I'm not super busy with commissions at the moment, I'm using that time to just really hunker down and do a ton of studio work, and it's been
Yes.
wonderful. Like I'm
Oh,
just loving it.
yes.
Especially since I have my new studio space and I can just be in here and yeah.
I'm so happy for you with that. Like, I hardly know you, but I was like rooting for you so much with that whole
Oh,
thing. Like, I think that is just so well deserved, and it
thank
looks
you.
fantastic from social media. Are you
Thank
just
you.
loving it so much?
I love it so much.
Oh,
And I have a lot of artist friends around here. We had a little
great.
open house back in October, and so local friends could come in and stop in and see it.
That's
And I
wonderful.
was like, yeah, I think I'm going to open it up for, like a life painting session once a month or every other month
Yes.
or something. And then later I was like, I kind of want it all to myself for a
Yeah.
little while longer.
Yeah, just for a little bit. I was actually going to ask you if you were going to, teach workshops or anything out of it,
I
but yeah,
will. I will.
yeah,
Yes, that's the
anytime.
plan. There's plenty of space for that,
That's
and that's the goal
fantastic.
eventually to open it up for that. But right now, I'm just enjoying it.
Wow, that's wonderful. Yeah, and I mean, if people want workshops, they can go online.
They can
Um,
go online, and I also still teach other workshops. Like I have one in Michigan this summer, and I have actually one in Italy next year. So,
Print on demand. I want to talk to you about the Fine Art America thing because I actually
mhm.
started Fine Art America by following you and seeing like, okay, she's got this fantastic brand, high-end clients, like she's doing Fine Art America, I'm going to try it out. How do you feel about print on demand? How's that going for you? And how did you make your decision to choose Fine Art
Yeah.
America?
I've been on there since 2008, so I've been on there
Okay,
a
wow.
long
Okay.
time. And I originally started on there. I mean, it's gotten so big since then. So
Yeah.
the market is really, really saturated. And who knows? I haven't really spent a lot of time browsing to see what other art is on there, but there's a lot of photography,
Mhm.
drawing, watercolor, all different mediums. But I originally started it because I had so many friends and family who could not afford my originals.
Yes.
And I wanted art to be available to everyone. And I didn't want them going to, no offense, Hobby Lobby or Michael's or one of these craft stores where they sell cheap prints made in China.
Hmm.
I wanted them to be buying something that they had an emotional connection to and that was by a real artist, someone who's alive and well and,
Yes.
trying to make art for a living. So I've just kept going with it and it's been great. I wouldn't say it's like a huge source of income for me, but it's
Yeah.
nice to have when like in that situation. I
Yes.
also have like higher end reproductions made of some of my paintings. Maybe once or twice a year, I'll select a painting that I think would make a great giclée print. And I actually take it to a local place here in Denver where they have one of those massive drum scanners. And they
Yes.
scan it, they color correct it, they get rid of all the little highlights that show up, the glare.
Yes.
And so it ends up being this wonderful high quality print, and they can print on canvas or really high quality paper. So I offer those for a little bit more, and
Yes.
I sign them and number them and personally like deliver them to people, especially if they're local. So I kind of add that extra little touch to those.
Yeah. This podcast is brought to you by Alpha 6 Corporation, professional quality paints and tools for artists and craftsmen alike. From lettering enamels, acrylics, and specialty textile paints to brushes, tools, and accessories made right here in America, Alpha 6 Corporation's product lineup is created by artists for artists. With unmatched customer service and a dedication to their craft, I am so proud to partner with Alpha 6 Corporation. In my studio, I use their carbon fiber maul stick, artist series brushes, and durable enamel paints. Whether you're a beginning artist or a seasoned professional, you can find inspiration with their do-it-yourself painting kits and monthly subscription boxes. Use the affiliate link in the description of this podcast to create with the same tools and paint that I use daily, and ultimately support a Detroit-based company that fosters creativity with makers from all over the world. You're not just painting and selling, like there's a lot of different income streams happening, whether they're small or large. I think that's really cool that you're trying to hit like the low, medium, and high, clients as far as what they can
Yeah.
afford. I think
And
that's
you
so,
have
so
to. When you're
special.
an artist, you can't, I
Yeah.
mean, very few artists make a living on just one thing. There's
Yes.
all these
Yes.
other streams that you have to rely on for making enough to make a living. And so that's why I started a YouTube channel, and that's why I started my course website where I have the longer length videos for people to watch.
Hmm.
And I do email critiques through there. And so they can pay for that. And there's different tiers. And just having that available to people is really nice too, because not
Yes. Oh,
everybody can attend a workshop and not everybody can come and see my work at my gallery here in Denver. And so,
yes.
maybe they want to buy a print. So just trying to make art available to everybody.
I love your critique videos. You haven't posted too many of them, but it's so intriguing to watch how you switch the backgrounds.
Critiques, I'm trying to implement them more in my workshops because they're so valuable. Because
Yes.
sometimes, especially in a group critique or like the video that you're talking about, where you're
Yes.
seeing somebody else's work being critiqued, you don't feel as, I guess maybe attacked is the wrong word.
Well, it goes back to what we were talking about when a critiques to me help you talk about your work. That is
Yeah,
so important. You have to have constructive criticism.
very, very
But
true. But it's
yeah,
also helpful when you see somebody else's work being critiqued because then you can be like,
yes.
oh, I can apply that to my own, and you can
Hmm.
take that and learn
Very
from all
true.
these different problems that are being solved in that session. So
Yes.
it's a wonderful
Yes.
thing. Yeah.
Well, I want to jump into talking a little bit about having like a family and owning a business and being an artist because you had a blog for a while that was I don't think it was called Paint Like a Mother, but that's one of your taglines for your studio and I just absolutely love it.
Yes.
How did having kids like change your business?
Oh, it changed everything. For one thing, I don't have time to blog anymore. I
Yes.
kind of miss that. I used to write all the time and it was such a great outlet for me, but
Yes.
video has sort of since replaced that.
Hmm.
And the kids, I remember when I got pregnant with my daughter in 2013, it was a surprise. And
Okay.
I hadn't been planning to have kids, or at least I was planning to wait even longer. We still waited 5 years, which was great for helping me kind of build my business, but I was honestly like devastated when I found out I was pregnant. And then eventually I kind of warmed up to it. And those 9 months were such a gift because it allowed me to not only get to know my baby and bond with her while she was growing, but also just come to terms with the changes that were going to take place and
Hmm.
become more accepting of this as, okay, this is going to be the next step in my life. And
Yes.
I don't know what it means or what it's going to look like. And there was a lot of fear and a lot of uncertainty, but I knew that I was going to love this child. It was going to be painted all the time. Heck
Yes.
yeah. And no matter what happened, I was going to continue as an artist. So I was very, very determined not to make motherhood my whole identity or my whole world, and to hopefully inspire other moms who are artists to continue with their work. Because everything in the art history books that I was seeing about women artists, they either chose not to get married and have children, or a lot of the artists that I knew, even just in the generation before me, who ended up being my students, coming to my
Mm.
workshops, they were, older women who had put their art aside for 20, 30 years so that they could raise their kids. And they would always show up to my workshops and just, they had this sadness about them. Like, I lost all this time. I lost all this time. And no, I don't regret raising my kids, but what if I had kept going with my art while I had my kids? And so that was a question I wanted to answer in my own life. Can I do
Mm.
both?
Wow.
And yes, you can do both. And
Yes.
we live in a day and age where that's possible
Mhm.
because we have so many other things that we don't have to do ourselves. We don't have
Yes.
to grind our own flour down to make bread. We
Yes.
don't,
Yes.
we
We don't have to
have
can.
central air and heating. Like, we have all these wonderful conveniences and childcare, and if we're lucky enough to have a partner that helps us with the kids,
Amen.
then even better.
Yeah.
That was a game changer. And the best part about it was that, and I've said this before, I didn't feel like I had a voice in my art before I had kids. And then once my kids came along, I knew exactly what I wanted to say.
Really?
Yeah.
God, you're making me all emotional over here. Jeez. That's so beautiful. And yeah, because you wouldn't have never opened up this new imagery in your work had that not happened. Like it's like God knew
Oh,
exactly what you needed and you didn't
he did.
even
He
know.
did. And as a child, I was always so future oriented. I was always goal
Mhm.
oriented. I was like, when I get this to this age, I'm going to do this. When I'm 16, I'm going to get my driver's license and I'm going to go to college when I'm 18. And,
It's the
I had this
same.
plan for my life.
Same.
And there was a huge part of me that missed out on just the innocence of childhood and just having fun as a kid,
Hmm.
using my imagination. I was so literal about everything. And so my early work really reflects that too. Like I said, it was super realistic, super tight.
Yes.
And to me, that was the epitome of making good art. And when I had my kids and things started getting messy and there were markers all over the floor and
Hmm.
finger paint everywhere, I was like, there was something really profound in that I
Mhm.
hadn't been able to see until I had these children. And it
Mm.
was like, this is where it's at. This is
Yes.
the purity of creation right here, the
Hmm.
innocence of it. There's something so like free of guile, and it's just pure creation. So
Yeah.
I was so inspired by that.
Hmm.
And then my daughter's imagination is just through the roof. Like, she's got this amazing imagination. And so I've been piggybacking off of that. I have to say, I have to give her
Wow.
some credit for that. So it's been really fun to explore those themes and explore childhood all over again because that was something that I kind of missed out on as a kid.
Wow, that was so beautifully said, and I keep saying I resonate, but man, I totally resonate with everything you said.
Oh,
And your blog did help me. So for the time that it was written, it did help me read
oh,
else like in the trenches of like figuring out early childhood, but then even more so like figuring out if you even wanted to do this, like to have the
Yeah.
family and have the kids.
Yeah. I'm
I would,
so glad you found that helpful. I've
yes,
talked to so many moms, and we're all in this together, and sometimes it feels so lonely and it feels so isolated. Like the fact that you've started a podcast and you're reaching out to other creatives, like that is so awesome and so life-giving for you.
thank you. Yeah, so
So really
thank you,
important.
thank you, thank you. I vividly remember like the first thing I did when I held my son. I thought, oh my gosh, I almost missed out on this because I was so career oriented and I was so like, oh, I gotta make this work, you know? And
Yeah.
that's a good quality I think to have, but it definitely, my husband is more, he's less type A and he really enjoys the small things in life and he's always telling me like, hey, slow down, like remember it's
Mine's
okay
that way
to
too.
do
They
this,
sound
you know,
very
it's okay to
similar.
sit and watch the snails crawl up the wall with your son for 20 minutes. Like it's totally okay. Um,
I love
that
that.
yeah, it's a great reminder. I get so freaking tied up in ambition that it's almost a sin, you know? I fail to trust in the greater plan, and there is one, and
Mhm.
I'm just a part of it. But going through that line, I just want to talk to you a little bit about your faith because, as I stated earlier, I did a deep dive in your website and I actually read your whole, I don't know what to even call it, like an ebook basically of
Yeah,
nudity in Christian art and everything. I would just love to talk to you a little bit about your faith before we really wrap this up,
sure.
but like how it's played a role not just in your art, but also in your business and as a mother and a wife. How does that all come together for you?
Yeah, well, it kind of ties in with motherhood aspect. I've been a Christian my whole life, and so that has really guided a lot of my choices in art and in business. But I also had to come to terms with the fact that art and art history is filled with naked bodies, right? And I
Hmm.
grew up in an environment that was extremely conservative, extremely puritanical in a lot of ways
Hmm.
about bodies and just how we view ourselves. I felt this strong pull, and I believe this was of God, that our bodies are beautiful, they are pure, they are perfect the way He created us. And the way that we depict them is more important than whether or not they're clothed.
Yes, yes. Like I got like the motivation of the painting means more than the way that they are arranged. Like what was your motive
Yeah.
for the work? It was so powerful the way you wrote that. I
Yeah.
even wrote it down in my sketchbook. So, so
Yeah, so
powerful.
you can still find that blog post. There's, I
Yeah.
think, several different ones. It was a whole series, and
Hmm.
I go into sort of an art history deep dive and talk
Yes.
about
Yes,
the history of
definitely.
nudity in art. But yeah, from a Christian perspective. And so, and then going into the motherhood side of that, I think a lot of women in today's day and age might choose not to have children, or if they find out they're pregnant, they might choose to not go through with that pregnancy. For me, it was a non-negotiable. It was like, no, this is sacred life.
Same.
This is the way God designed us, and it is a gift to be able to give birth to a baby.
Oh, yes.
Not every woman can do that, and
No.
so, I don't take that for granted for a second. But I also realize now that it was God's way of grounding me because I too have a lot of ambition, a lot of workaholic tendencies. I actually gave a talk at a Christian conference about how I had made art my idol and kind of the downfall that it led me to, where I had to just put that art on the altar and
Mm.
lay it on the altar like Abraham laid Isaac on the altar
Yes.
and be okay with giving it up for a time because I was going through some really, really heavy, awful stuff with my son, and
Yes.
he's special needs. And so, all that to say, motherhood and my faith have kept me from allowing art to become my everything. And as
Mm-hmm.
soon as you allow anything to be the ultimate,
Hmm.
it destroys you and it loses its purity, it loses its joy, it loses all the good things about it. It becomes something that isn't for our better or for our
Hmm.
greater good. I had to learn that the hard way, and so God taught
Yes.
me a lot through
Yes.
parenting my unique and wonderful children.
Yes.
And
For sure. Do you think it has attributed to your success as a business owner or, you know, as a painter overall?
Not necessarily, because I don't do overtly Christian art. I
Yes.
have a few paintings that allude to that, like the one that you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast about the girl in front of the lion.
Yes.
That one, it has multiple meanings. It could also be the Chronicles of Narnia. It could be Aslan. It could be,
Yes.
it's a kind of a rite of passage painting too, because
It
she has
is.
her little stuffed animals around her and she's embracing her inner um, lion. And so multiple narratives with that one.
Yes.
But no, I don't know that it's necessarily prevented me from either success or failure in my business. There have
Hmm.
been times though where I was a little bit too vocal about it in certain circles because artists are a very diverse crowd of people. We've got a whole spectrum, right? We've
Hmm.
got extremely conservative, we've got extremely progressive, or whatever you want to call it. You've
Yes.
got the whole gamut of individuals in the art world. And so
Yes.
I've had to learn how to navigate that, and that's a tricky
Same.
place to be without compromising my faith.
Do you have a specific way to like get out of burnout?
I did for a while,
Hmm.
and I think it's evolving over time. So our needs change as we change, right?
Yes.
And some needs are essential and don't change, but like certain things like, okay, for example, when my son was a baby, I felt like the only way for me to actually get any rest was to physically leave the house and go somewhere like out of state. And so there were several years in a row that in January or February, I would go to the desert somewhere
Yes. Yes.
just to get out of Denver, get away from winter, get away from my family for 3 days. And I would go for 3 days because that number is really important.
Mm.
There's actually been studies done of people being outside for 3 days in a row and how your cortisol levels drop in that time. And you need
Wow.
those 3 days. If it's any less than that, you don't really quite get the same effect.
Wow. I love that you tie like fitness and health into your whole overall routine.
It's not just the desert, but I think the desert has also some symbolic meaning to me as well. And that kind of goes along with my faith, where,
Mm.
Jesus spent 40 days and 40 nights in the desert just
Mm.
to be with God. And that was when he transitioned into his public ministry after that. And so you really need time alone in nature and with God
Yes.
to meditate, to refocus. I've found that when I start losing my curiosity for the natural world or my joy for a sunrise or a sunset or something that naturally I would find to be incredibly beautiful. If I start
Yes.
to lose that, that is a red flag telling me that I'm reaching burnout and that it is time to go and be alone for a few days. And I don't necessarily have to be painting, although it's a bonus if I can.
Hmm.
But you never stop being an artist. Like you can go for 3 days and just gather information, ideas in your mind,
Hmm.
journal, take pictures, but you don't have to be creating. You're still banking something back there in your mind.
A term in the I went to a Christian college and I had to go through all these Bible classes just to graduate, and I remember learning about this term. Like I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but it's ex nihilo, and it stands for created from nothing. It was mind-blowing to me to think, okay, God created all of this from with no inspiration. And then here we are as creators, and we're all subconsciously creating from things that we've seen or pick up over time. And now with social media, we have all this inspiration all the time, all the time, all the time. And I'm like, wow. And to think that like God created everything from nothing, it reminds me of how powerful he truly is. Man, it's just very humble. It goes back to what you're saying. It's humbling. It's very humbling to be a
Yeah.
Christian, and apply that to a lot of different aspects in your life.
Yeah, I love that. And one of my favorite authors and artists is actually, he's a very abstract artist. He's Japanese. His
Oh,
name
cool.
is Makoto Fujimura, and he's written
Yes.
several wonderful, wonderful books about art and the Bible and just what it is to be a creator, but from a spiritual standpoint, and how creating is such a deeply spiritual act.
Yes.
And so, yeah, I find a lot of inspiration there as well. But yeah, we're lucky enough to have someone to model our work after.
Mm,
That's what
amen.
makes us different from God. He didn't need that.
Exactly, exactly. That is so true. Well, the last thing I'd love to like wrap this up with is kind of on a high note. I want to talk to you about one of your most memorable or favorite projects that you've done in your very long career of being an oil painter.
Oh, wow. I would have to say one of the highlights of my entire career so far has been the painting that I did of my son called King of the Wild Things.
Okay.
And it was based off of the Maurice Sendak book, Where the Wild Things Are. And my
Yes.
son was I believe 2 years old at the time. He was already too big for the costume that I bought him, but I got him this costume. He's wearing the gold crown and like the fluffy furry outfit. And he's posed in the forest, and then there's all these wild animals coming up behind him, and he's holding a stick. He's leading them with this stick.
Oh,
And my favorite thing about that painting is his expression. I was like, I have to get this expression right. And I love the design, I love the animals, I love all the other things about it. But to me, the expression was so crucial because it had to show that he's a toddler, right?
yes.
He's testing boundaries. He's a little bit confrontational, but he's also very innocent and still a little bit unsure about the world. And so I had to have that juxtaposition of personality in there. And at the time, we were going through figuring out whether or not he had autism. So we were going through the process of getting him diagnosed. He had been diagnosed through the state, kind of informally, and then we had to get him medically diagnosed. And so I was going through all of that, and trying to figure out why my kid was so different from all the other kids and why he was getting kicked out of his preschool, why we weren't getting invited to people's houses, because nobody wanted us there, with this crazy kid. And so I was going through all of that and trying to figure out how can I put this in a painting and yet show my love for my son and also how wild he is. And so that was the painting that came out of it. And because that painting was something that I created out of total love and not for anyone else, it was just for me. That's why the painting was so successful.
Wow.
It ended up winning the gold medal in the National Oil Painters of America juried exhibition.
Oh my God.
It was sold pretty much immediately after I displayed it there. And it won several other awards after that. So, yeah, I remember just being so affirmed in my career as an artist, affirmed in the decisions I was making for my family and as a mother, and just like it was a sign from God that, hey, you're on the right track. It's a battle and it's a struggle, and you're always going to have a divided heart over being a mom and being an artist. But ultimately, it showed me that God knows the desires of our hearts. He loves us for those desires, and he wants us to be able to delight in those things as long as we're doing them to his glory. And so that was a huge life reminder for me. So I still look at that as like my miracle painting, because I didn't know where I was headed at that point. I just didn't know how things were going to go with my son. And, I've had a lot of hiccups even since then, but I look back at that memory and I'm just like, God is good, God is faithful, and I'm on the right track.
Wow, that is so, so powerful. Thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing that. Did you get to keep a print of that, or did you keep any
I did, yeah.
Okay,
That was
good.
one that I had scanned. Yep. So I have a full-size print of it, and
Oh,
it's
good.
the same, but I still love it.
Wow. Wow, that is so, so special. I just hold on to that feeling of, I guess, for validation is really
Yeah.
what it, because I don't think we get that too often, but when we do, it's like, oh gosh, like this is so good and pure and true. And it is like that realization, like, okay, I'm doing what he's asked me to do. This is a good sign here. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's few and far between.
Yeah. And
Because
we're going to have so many more failures and just disappointments in our careers than we will wins. And so we
100%.
got to hang on to those, because every win is a win,
Yes,
no
a
matter how big or
100%.
small.
For sure. Well, Anna, let me let you go. I would love for you to share any upcoming, events that you want to talk about or workshops, and then where everyone can contact you and see your artwork.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you can find me on Instagram. It's @AnnaRose_artist. And I have a YouTube channel. So just Anna Rose Bain. You can search for it. I'm on there. And I do have one workshop coming up this summer. It's June 17th through 19th in Michigan. Forget the name of the town.
Okay.
But all that's on my website. You can find that on there.
And then if you are listening to this, be sure to hop over to my YouTube channel, Asphalt Canvas Custom Art, and we're going to have this interview posted with photos of Anna's work playing and/or videos if she can provide those. And I just want to thank you seriously for being here and taking the time. I know the podcast is still very small, so you've done me a huge favor, and eventually I'd love to return the favor by promoting your work even more. That's the whole goal, but it's just been such an honor for me to talk to you, and I'm so grateful for this time.
Hey, what a great conversation. You asked some great questions, so thank you. The pleasure was mine.
Thank you for listening to The Curated Craftsman. You can support this podcast and become a member of our creative community on Patreon. If you were inspired by this conversation, please leave a review, share the show, and subscribe.